The Alien franchise is famous for two things: incredible sci-fi horror and an insane amount of behind-the-scenes shit. Seriously, for a franchise with only 9 films, that's a lot. Pretty much every movie after Scott's and Cameron's was a mess of feuds, studio interference, and some ugly behind-the-scenes drama. Let's take a look at how all that played out at the box office. When 20th Century Fox first started looking for a director for Alien, most people in Hollywood wanted nothing to do with it. The Star Wars boom was happening, but the Alien script by Dan O'Bannon was a straight-up monster movie, not a space adventure, and the directors Fox approached just didn't get it. And then Ridley Scott read the script and instantly saw the potential here. Alien started with a modest $4.2 million budget. Scott came in, drew up his own storyboards, and Fox execs were so impressed they doubled the budget on the spot, though by the end the official numbers go as high as 11 or even 14. And it paid off. Alien grossed about $188 million worldwide, which is huge for a hard R-rated sci-fi horror movie in 1979. Nobody expected this to be a blockbuster. It was basically pitched as Texas Chainsaw Massacre in space. Fox was skeptical about the whole project. Science fiction didn't sell before Star Wars, and even after that, this one was a risk. But Scott's vision sold them. There was only one major studio demand. Scott originally wanted the movie to end with Ripley getting killed by the alien, but the producers vetoed that and made sure Ripley survives. That one choice is probably what allowed the franchise to even exist. 7 years later, James Cameron is the guy brought in to make a sequel, and he's got to justify why anyone should touch a classic. Aliens is made for about $17 million, which is still a moderate budget for the time. Cameron goes practical: miniatures, models, real sets, not huge spending. The result is $131 million worldwide, one of the biggest movies of 1986. Basically, Cameron single-handedly turned Alien into a full-on franchise. What's funny to me here is how much pushback Cameron had to deal with. Fox originally didn't even have a deal with Sigourney Weaver to come back as Ripley. They actually tried to save money by suggesting Ripley just get written out of the script. Cameron flat out refused and threatened to quit if Weaver wasn't in it. Fox gave in and paid her $1 million, about 30 times what she made on the first film. The British crew didn't respect Cameron. He was still a new guy back then, 10 years before Titanic. And they also weren't big fans of his producer, Gail Ann Hurd, who also happened to be his wife. That led to some real tension on set. Cameron even fired the cinematographer to take more control. But even with all that drama, Cameron turned in a movie that earned more than 10 times its budget and landed 7 Oscar nominations. That's pretty much unheard of for a big, R-rated action sequel. Alien 3 is infamous for how much trouble it had just making it to the screen. The budget ballooned to somewhere between $50 and $60 million. Fox said 50, but the rumors all said it ended up closer to 60 after endless rewrites and reshoots. Easily the most expensive Alien movie up to that point. They went through multiple scripts, built sets they never used, and dragged out the shoot way longer than anyone planned. It actually ended up grossing about $160 million worldwide, so yeah, it made a profit, but not the kind Fox expected. US box office was about $55 million, the rest came from overseas, and even though that's not bad money, it was the lowest grossing of the original trilogy. Everyone just saw it as a letdown. Hollywood was full of Alien 3 rumors during production. Everyone said it was a disaster, that Fox hated the early cuts, that the preview screenings went horribly, and that the movie basically needed another 6 weeks of reshoots and $15 million just to be watchable. But there's another angle. Some people thought it was actually kind of brilliant, especially for the choice of director. David Fincher was 27 years old, never directed a feature before, and Fox just handed him a $50 million franchise movie with the script unfinished. The first director was fired while the sets were still being built. The line producer got fired right before the start date. The script wasn't even locked until 2 weeks into shooting. So basically, Fincher inherited a total mess, and he later said, "Alien 3 was flawed from its inception. Pretty fucked up well before we started shooting." He fought for his own vision but lost almost every fight because he was a new guy. Studio execs kept interfering, especially in editing. Fincher completely disowned the theatrical cut and said it was the worst thing that ever happened to him. So after Alien 3, Fox wanted to try again with a totally different approach and an even bigger budget. Resurrection cost about $75 million, most of that going into effects in Sigourney Weaver's paycheck. She wasn't even interested at first, but they gave her $11 million just to come back. She even said they basically drove a dump truck full of money to my house. That number was almost the entire budget of the original Alien back in 1979. Resurrection grossed about $161 million worldwide. On paper, that's not bad, about double the budget. But it opened at number 2 in the US, lost out to Disney's Flubber, believe it or not, and made less than any of the earlier movies. Fox hoped it would reignite the franchise, but people just didn't respond the way they wanted. The real wild part here is the creative team. For some reason, Fox thought it'd be a great idea to hire a French director, Jean-Pierre Jeunet, the guy who would go on to do Amélie. And what's even funnier, they paired him with Buffy creator Joss Whedon on the script. So tonally, this movie was all over the place. There's horror, dark comedy, and weird characters. Whedon just kept trashing the movie long after release. They did everything wrong. They said the lines, but they said them all wrong, and they cast it wrong, and they designed it wrong. They executed it in such a ghastly fashion as to render it almost unwatchable. Basically, he just hated everything about it. Jeunet fired back that if Whedon had gotten his way, it would have been a big success. Something for morons. And he just plain hated Whedon's silly tone. And this been going on for years. In the 2000s, Fox decided to smash together two of its biggest sci-fi brands, Alien and Predator, into one movie. They shot it in Prague to keep costs down, and director Paul W.S. Anderson managed to deliver an effects-heavy creature feature for about $70 million. As far as business decisions go, this one was actually smart. A real commercial success. $172.5 million worldwide. The $38 million U.S. opening was one of the best for the franchise. But here's where things get interesting. Fox made it PG-13, which was a first for either series. That meant teenagers could finally get in, and it definitely helped with ticket sales. But it pissed off longtime fans who expected the R-rated violence. Hardcore Alien and Predator fans were not happy, and Sigourney Weaver famously hated the idea too. Actually, she was so against it that when she heard Fox planned an Alien vs. Predator mashup, she asked to have Ripley killed off in Alien 3. Fox's move was pure business. They wanted to fill as many seats as possible, even if it meant toning things down. Reviews were mostly negative, but Fox obviously didn't care. The movie made money, breathed life into both brands, and did big business on home video. That was enough for Fox to greenlight a sequel and try to turn it into its own mini-franchise. For the sequel, Fox cut the budget down to $40 million and gave the project to the brothers Strauss, two effects guys making their directorial debut. The movie pulled in $129 million globally and dropped way off from the first one. Turnout was especially weak in the US, just $41 million domestic. Fox did listen to fan backlash this time, and they let the sequel go back to an R rating, so there's more gore, more violence, and all that. But Requiem ran into a different problem. It's so dark you literally can't see what's happening half the time. Fans complained you couldn't even make out the creature effects. There's no stars, and the story just plays like a low-budget monster movie. The directors tried to satisfy the diehards, but critics and general audiences didn't buy it. It opened at just $10 million, dropped fast, and ended up being the most hated entry in either franchise. The studio didn't even market it much. Requiem was a low-priority project, just a way to squeeze out some final cash from AVP. They dumped it out on Christmas Day, which is a weird call for a bloody monster flick. After this one underperformed, Fox shelved the crossover idea completely. It took 5 years before the Alien brand came back, with Ridley Scott in charge again. Prometheus was Ridley Scott's big return to the Alien universe, but not exactly as a sequel. This was a prequel, and Fox went all in, dropping $125 million on it. Scott shot the movie using state-of-the-art 3D cameras, did a ton of location work, and packed the cast with big names. All that money paid off. Prometheus pulled in over $400 million worldwide, which actually made it the highest-grossing alien film ever if you don't adjust for inflation. Pretty impressive, especially since it's a cerebral, R-rated sci-fi movie, and without actual aliens. But Prometheus pissed off a lot of people. Some loved the big philosophical questions, the visuals, and the sheer scale of it all, but most of the hardcore fans got annoyed. There's a lot of plot threads that never get resolved, characters make a lot of dumb decisions, and the xenomorph only shows up for a few seconds. The movie started out as a straight-up alien prequel, but Ridley Scott and Damon Lindelof wanted to move away from xenomorph lore. So the focus here is mostly on the engineers and some big existential stuff. This move obviously frustrated a lot of people who expected a more direct tie-in to the original. But from the business side, Prometheus did exactly what Fox wanted, made bank, and gave them the confidence to keep the franchise going. Covenant came out 5 years later, and this time the studio wanted Scott to bring the xenomorphs back. Budget was a bit lower, $97 million, and this time the cast wasn't packed with A-listers. The movie grossed about $240 million worldwide, so not a flop, but way less than Prometheus. That drop, almost $160 million, definitely worried the studio. Opening weekend in the US was $36 million, which was okay, but the movie didn't have legs. By the end of its run, Covenant was one of the lowest grossing entries in the series. Only Alien 3 and much-hated Requiem made less worldwide. This put the brakes on the idea of a new prequel trilogy. Scott brought the xenomorphs back, went back to basics, but even he admitted it's tough to compete with superhero movies these days. The underwhelming numbers meant the planned third movie was shelved, especially after Disney bought Fox in 2019. For a while, the future of the franchise was pretty much up in the air. Romulus came out in 2024 and took things in a new direction. Kinda soft reboot. Fede Alvarez directed, and this time the budget was a lean $80 million. Romulus was actually going to be a Hulu streaming exclusive. The studio was pretty cautious after Covenant. But once they saw what they had, Disney's 20th Century division put it in theaters, and that gamble paid off. The movie made over $350 million worldwide. That makes it the second highest grossing alien movie ever, right behind Prometheus. It's a standalone story not centered on Ripley with a younger cast, basically a bunch of no-name kids, and they use this move later in Alien Earth too. The idea was to appeal to a new generation but still keep that retro-futuristic look from the original. It opened at number 1 in the US, pulling in $42 million. International numbers were even bigger. About 70% of the total came from outside the US, with China being a huge surprise. The movie actually sparked some viral news over there. There was some story about a kid getting scared in the theater, and it blew up on social media. And for a while, it was even the highest-grossing IMAX horror release ever.